mute if you want to say something. You'll see I have two screens, so I may not be looking at my textual screen. I've got my phone in front of me, but if you say something and I don't get it, just feel free to just say something. Okay. So in some of the other professionals, I tutor to the NCE, some of my psychology people, there are some numbers. The social work does not have numbers, okay? It doesn't tell us when we can't, It's really based on, like the question of the years, how many years you have to keep records? It depends on your state. Okay, so in my state, I live in Tennessee but work in Georgia. To be honest, I don't know what it is in Georgia. I mean, Tennessee, because I work in Georgia. In Georgia, it's 7 years. So when it comes to that question, it's determined by the state. Your ethical principles, as I've said before, those are the things that we live by. Service, my goal is to be service. Social justice means that I want what is best for everyone. I'm going to fight for what I believe is a social injustice. I believe in the dignity and worth of the person. Cultural, ethical, poor, rich, it doesn't matter. I really believe in the dignity of people. As a college professor, I tell my students that if you are in a profession and at this point you are not treating your clients with respect, get out. Just don't do that to people. Treat them with dignity and respect. Most of the clients that we see in this profession already come to us with all these issues, and people think they're sometimes the scum of the earth. We can't do that. We've got to really see the worth, the value, the strength perspective in that person. We value human relationships. It's really, really important. And this one I saw today. I was giving a student a lesson on integrity. This is professional integrity. That means that we will follow the guidelines, the rules, what the profession looks like. And I'm sure many of you know that the term social worker is a protected term. And we have lots of people who do not have a social work degree who call themselves social workers. It's a protected term. They're not supposed to do that. I'm not suggesting you go out and do anything. I'm just saying if you're going to carry that term, then make sure you're aware of our profession, our guidelines, our values, our code of ethics, things that we do that the professions don't do. And competence, especially when it comes to cultural competence, that is my job always, always, always to make sure that I know what's going on. Okay. Self-determination. Can someone tell me, does a client always have the right to self-determination?
No, if they're not competent,
You
if they're
got it.
not in their right state of mind, and they
You
don't have the right
got
to
it. You
self-determination.
got it. The first answer is if they're suicidal or homicidal, we don't get to let them do that, okay? And then also you'll see those questions. Thanks, Jasmine. You'll see those questions that a client is, there's one, she's 20 years old. She is she's having a delusion. She refuses to go to the hospital, and she just wants to go home. So she does not have that right to make that decision. I can't let her go in the streets. I can't let her do that. And however, I do have to do something. And I'm not going to hospitalize her. She's not in immediate danger to herself or others, but I can't just let her go because she thinks she needs to. She's not in a correct state of mind. Good. Very good. Okay. Other than that, they have the right to self-determination. That includes my minors. So a lot of those questions you'll see about minors, the mother wants to know what's happening, what's going on. My client has that right if they don't want their mother to know that information, as long as they're not in harm. I'm going to respect that. Okay. Informed consent, of course, all of you have probably signed an informed consent at least one time this year because you went to the doctor's office and doctor handed you the sheet of paper and said, here. We should not do that. We're supposed to go over the treatment. We're supposed to go over the pros, the cons, all of those things with our client. They're supposed to understand it. Part of the IRB, the review board, is making sure that our clients understand the process. Was there a question? Maybe? Hear any of those come in? Okay. It continues to talk about clients who are receiving services involuntarily. We're supposed to treat them the same way that we would treat a client who is there voluntarily. I've seen several questions on that. So if a client decides he wants to withdraw from treatment and he's an involuntary client, what do we do?
Can he withdraw?
He sure can. I won't tell the
he's
judge what
involuntary.
happened. Yes, he can do whatever he wants to. I'm going to report to the judge that he didn't participate, but he still has that right. Okay, so I'm going to answer. And in those situations also, I'm actually going to get, I'm going to try to get an informed consent signed, even though he is the judge has made him come, or probation or parole has said he has to be there. I'm still going to try to get him to be there and follow all of those rules with him. Okay. Let's see here. Competence. Okay, that's my own competence for the test. Unless the question clearly states it's out of your range, the assumption is that you are the very best social worker. So unless the question clearly states you do not have expertise in this area, you don't ever refer out. You are the best. So I refer to another social worker only if the question clearly states that. You can't just refer out because it's uncomfortable or we don't know this. It's our job to learn it. In that same vein, though, when it comes to those relationships, the ones inside that clinical relationship, if there's something going on in that relationship, that's when I go to the supervisor. I let her know that, you know, I've got feelings for him, or he reminds me of my dad, or whatever's going on, that transference, countertransference, if it's affecting that relationship, then I will definitely go to my supervisor. Some of the choices, and I've seen it just rarely, says refer out. If that's the only choice, then yes, but that's usually not the answer. The answer is most often you're just going to go to your supervisor and you'll still keep the client. Okay, but the assumption is that I will work in the boundary of my education, training, licensure, certification, consultation, etc. Okay, if I am learning some new services, I'm going to provide interventions in substantive areas or use intervention techniques that are appropriate. Okay. When generally recognized standards do not exist with respect to an emerging area of practice, I'm going to use careful judgment, take responsible steps. I've seen that question. A client brings to you that they have heard this new therapy and they want you to try it. Can you try it? And the answer to that particular question was you needed to research it first, because we don't want to try anything that we don't want to be harmful to our client. And especially, you know, new things come along. If you're not old enough to remember, there was and it's unethical and we don't do it anymore because children died, but there was that rebirthing thing. That was for children with RAD, reaction attachment disorder. And for a bit, there was this new technique that if we rebirth those babies, and they sometimes I've seen them rolled up in a carpet, or I would see them in this. There's a canoe-like thing that when you fold it together, it kind of looks like a vagina, like the lips, the labia. And you would push on the child until they came out through the end. And several children died. It was not an ethically based practice. So that is something that, you know, people wanted to try. A couple of kids died, so not okay. So if a client comes to you and says, I want to try this, you know, research it. If there's not enough empirical or evidence to say that it works, then it's really okay to say, we just can't do that. Okay? Because she'll sue you in a heartbeat if something happens, I promise you. Okay. Cultural awareness and social diversity. It is our job to make sure that we know. Okay. And there's no way that I can know about every culture. And I am world traveled. I love traveling. World traveled. I cannot know about every culture. I cannot. So someone comes to me that I'm supposed to be treating My job to know, my job. Sometimes that means asking my clients. Many times, I had an intern one time who was, she was from Thailand and she was Seventh-day Adventist. Knew nothing. Really I just didn't know. And in conversation with her, I did my own part of research. She would bring me material, but that's our job, to make sure that we know about the client's diversity. We should obtain education about and seek to understand the nature of the social diversity and oppression with respect to race, ethnicity, national origin, color. Okay, if you've had me before, you know this answer. How many races are there? And not people running in the race, but how many people are there? And not just the human race. How many races do we recognize? Come on, be brave.
Is it one?
More than the human race. They are, if you've watched NCSI or those things where they dig up bodies, they'll have just the skeletal remains and they'll say, oh, she was a petite Asian female. What? How do they know that? There are 3, maybe 4, depending on kind of what it says. So if you look at the census, which is coming out shortly, it'll talk about your ethnicity and your race. So there's Black, white, Asian, and many times are Native American or Native Alaskans. Everyone else falls in there somewhere. Okay, so then you say, what about my Latinos? So there are Black Latinos, Black Hispanics, white Hispanics, Asian Hispanics. If you're like Central America, which I just happen to be, Peruvians, many people there, they were actually conquered by China at one point. So you'll see a lot of those, the Guatemalans and people from Central America who look like they're Asian. Okay, so that is their race. Your race is determined by your skin color as well as your biological background. So when it comes to race, if the question asks about racism, race is very clear. There are only a few of them. My ethnicity, of course, there are a million. There are plenty of people who look like me. We have the same racial features. However, we have a very ethnic background. When I was in Belize last week, yes, I was in Belize. It's a Honduran country. They speak Spanish. And many people, again, look like me, but we have very, very different culture. I was in Grand Cayman. Grand Cayman is like the Switzerland of the Caribbean. And in Grand Cayman, they are still owned by the British. So not only do they look like me, then they speak the Queen's English and drive on like the other side of the road. So race is definitely this part, okay? Makeup, bone structure, but ethnicity is different than that. So just so you're clear about that when it comes to the test. Okay. Conflict of interest, you know that. I can't really, try to sell you stuff on the side. It's not okay. No dual relationships. If I have a dual relationship, and many times it does happen, my job is to always make sure that I protect the client. Okay. Can I barter? I know you've seen this question. Can I barter?
No.
Sure? It says that if the local area takes chickens, if the doctor and the lawyer take chickens, I can take chickens too. Okay, so I can barter if it's the local currency. Okay, so if everyone else does it, it is just fine. Okay, you live in a major city, you take some chickens, that's probably a problem. And I do live in a decent sized city, but I also, again, work in a very rural North Georgia, where it is not uncommon for the eye doctor to be paid with eggs. Not uncommon. That hasn't come up yet with me professionally. I teach, but it's not uncommon that there are a lot of farmers there. There are a lot of people who grow. That organic stuff that's $1 million in the grocery store now is very freely given down there. So where I work, bartering is very common. Okay, so just make sure that you know it has to be the code of the land. Okay. I always like this one. Access to records. What's the rule? A client that I have seen, can he have his records? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, if he doesn't pose a threat to himself or anyone else.
And if he does? Come on, you're right. Come on, give me more.
Well, if he does, then you don't give them to him, or you explain it to him.
Those are two separate things. So yes, I do both. Okay. So if social workers who are concerned that the client's access to records could cause serious misunderstanding or harm to the client should provide assistance in interpreting the records and consultation when the clients with regarding the records. That's when you call them in. I want my records. Well, Johnny, I think maybe this might be an issue. Let's come in and talk about it. Okay. However, I have the right to limit access to records, portions or all of their records, if I think the compelling evidence would cause serious harm to the client. Okay. If I decide to withhold their records, what do I have to do? What's that next line? Sorry. Document. Document, document, document. Okay. So if I have an issue with that, I have to document. So I can keep the records if there's good reason, and you need to know those words because I've seen those directly on the test. And some of my people have taken it once. Most often those are verbatim. I should limit the access to their records if there's compelling evidence that access would harm the client. If it would cause a serious misunderstanding, then I'm going to just make sure that I share with them the records. Okay? My favorite question, can I have sex with my clients? Anybody?
You
Jenny?
can. You should not, but you can.
I cannot have sex with my current clients.
The past clients.
Yes, I can. You sure? I shouldn't, and it's probably not wise, but if I choose to, okay? So social workers under no circumstances can have sex with a current client. No circumstances. Never, 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 never. However, I should not engage in sexual activity with a client, a personal friend of a client, etc. However, if I do, then it is my responsibility to assume the full burden for setting a clear, appropriate, and culturally sensitive boundaries. My responsibility. So somehow I find out that's the only person left on this earth to date, and I decide to date them. It is totally up to me. Okay. Should I? No, it makes it muddy and cleary and dirty, and I shouldn't. But it doesn't say I can't. And I've seen that on the test. So the only time I cannot is if they're a current client. Okay. So if they're a relative of a client, or if they are a former client. Okay. If I do, then this is that. Most often the question is very clear. It doesn't give you that option. It just says yes or no, and most often the answer is no. But I've seen the question where it gives that option of can I, and if it gives you the option of can I, that's the correct answer. I shouldn't, and if I do, I hold the full burden, but it doesn't say that I can't. Okay. Physical contact, I can tell you that I went to school in Miami. A very litigious state. I was taught don't ever touch clients. Never, 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 never touch them. Never touch them. Never touch them. I moved to Tennessee where everybody hugs everybody. It's a very foreign concept for me because that's just not, but you should not engage, again, this is I cannot, should not engage in contact when there is a possibility of psychological harm to the client as a result of the contact. Okay, social workers who engage in appropriate physical contact are responsible for setting clear, appropriate, and culturally sensitive boundaries that govern such physical contact. And I can tell you a very specific situation when I was very I first started my practice. I went to private practice pretty immediately. I got an LCSW in Florida. I didn't have to have an LMSW, and I was in a session where a husband divorced his wife in front of me. She had no idea it was coming, no idea. And being a very young, naive social worker, and it heard in my head a million times that you don't touch clients, I didn't hug her. This woman's life fell apart inside of my office, and I didn't hug her. And that was probably 30 years ago, and I'll never forget that. So that's the code of ethics. So at that point, that would have not been a danger to her. And I was not aware enough of the code of ethics to think that that's what I should have done. I mean, her life fell, I mean, literally in front of my eyes, and I'm sitting at my desk because I'd heard I wasn't supposed to do physical contact. Okay, I can't sexual harass my clients. I cannot cuss them back, even if they cuss me back. Okay, interruption of services and termination of services. That's a pretty common one. When do I terminate services? When can I?
When they completed their goals?
Yes. Or if they move. What else? If they
If
owe
they
me
no
money.
longer, oh no, if they don't have any money.
If they owe me money, so if a client comes to me and says, and I've seen this often on the test, a client comes to me and they've lost their job and they say, oh my goodness, Pam, I really need to see you, but I don't have my insurance right now, then ethically I have to come up with a payment plan, something that we can both agree with. It doesn't mean I'm giving my services away, but something that we can both agree with. Okay, so and if he agrees to that, and then he does not follow with that agreement, then I have the right to terminate with him. Okay, not because he lost his job though. We've set this payment plan up, we're working on it, and then one of the questions I've seen on the test is he forgets his wallet 3 times. Okay, I have the right to terminate. Okay, and my kids need to eat too, so we've done all this. The caveat to that is if he forgot his wallet 3 times and he tells me he's suicidal, can I terminate then? Cannot.
No, you can't.
Cannot. He has to be, I cannot let a client go who is in a very vulnerable situation. Okay. My ethical response to my colleagues. Okay. So I always go to my colleague. The only question I've ever seen where you don't go to your colleague first is when he was a pedophile. The question says he'd been arrested, and somehow the agency didn't pick up his background. That is not one time I'm going to go to my colleague. I'm going to go straight to my supervisor and say, hey, wait a minute, this guy's around kids. This shouldn't happen. Other than that, I'm always going to go to my colleague, even if they come to work drunk that day. And I know they're drunk that day. Sorry, that's why I can't get in. Okay, go ahead. Question? Sorry. Sorry. Just regarding, sorry, I have a question regarding Skype signing. If you have difficulty signing in as a guest, maybe, no, yes, no. Okay. you don't, my understanding is, if you don't have one, they'll ask you when I send you the link, it says join Skype. It'll ask you to create an account, but you don't have to. And Skype is free if you choose to. Okay. Let's see here. Consultation. I do a lot of consultation. The rule when I do a consultation, I am there. I come in. I do what they ask me to do. I give them information. Do they have to listen to my opinion? Nope. I'm a paid outsider to come in and just give my thoughts. Okay. The last thing I want to cover before we go to questions has to do with that subpoena and those court records. Try back up the top. Okay, so difference between a subpoena and a court order. What's the difference?
Court order is mandatory. You must send the records in, and the subpoena is like a request.
Anybody else?
Is that wrong?
Oh, I didn't say that. I did not say that at all.
A court order is deemed by the judge, and a subpoena is more of an attorney.
Okay. So I always think of subpoena as an invitation. So I'm going to politely decline. And then they are most often. Now, I have seen a question that says subpoena from the court. Okay, so if that's what it says, that's the same as a court order. If it just says subpoena, then it's from an attorney. Okay, so you're going through divorce, they want your records. But if it says subpoena from the court, that's the same as a court order. Is there a question there? Okay. So if I do get court ordered, if I get a thing in the mail, I'm going to then, I'm going to first try, okay, as long as the consent, the subpoena, it'll clearly state if it doesn't want my client to know, it'll clearly state that. So if it says that, I'm going to send the records no matter what. Okay, I take that back. I'm going to respond no matter what. I'm going to show up to the court date. If it doesn't say that, then what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to inform my client and tell my client that the court has ordered me for records, and I'm going to show up to the court date. If my client refuses to sign the release, I'm still going to the court date because I am not going to jail for anyone. When I go to jail, it will be because I deserve it. Okay, not because I didn't do that. So then what I'm going to say to the judge, I'm going to say is that this is privileged communication. I would like, Your Honor, if you could please not share this, if you could close the records. Hello, it is Pam. Hello. If you could close the records, I'm going to say any of those things, okay, because I owe that to my client. However, if the judge, and what has most often happened to me in real life is I work for the state of Georgia. We have an attorney that works for the state. So we go to court. I'm going to say, Your Honor, this is privileged communication. What was shared with me is information I'd like to share. I'm going to ask him if he would limit the scope. That's a legal term, limit the scope. So he doesn't get all of the information. But if he says, Pam, I need this, then I'm giving it. I will let the client know. And the code of ethics says I do want to try to get their consent, but if they don't, I'm still gonna do that. Limit the scope, privilege information as much as possible. Now, if that court order does not specifically say psychotherapy records, am I sending those?
No.
You got it. Psychotherapy records are to be kept separate. I do realize that many times you work for an agency and the agency doesn't do that, but for the test, psychotherapy notes for added security are kept separate. So therefore, unless either the client or the judge specifically says, send the psychotherapy notes, I am not sending them. Okay? So subpoena from attorney, And I have the right to not respond. Professionally, I think we shouldn't do that. So you should at least RSVP and say thanks, but no thanks. Okay. And on the test, it'll say, do you respond? And you can respond. You can say, hey, thanks for the invite, but I'm not coming. Okay. But a court order, then I'm going to respond. I'm going to show up. If you get a court order and you don't show up, you're going to jail. Okay, that's a violation. And again, when I go to jail, you'll know why I went to jail. It have nothing to do with the client. I would do some other illegal things, but not that client. Okay, questions? Okay, we're going to do some questions. If you have anything else specifically you want to ask me about those please do yourself the favor and read them. And, I'm a fan of TDC. I'm a fan of APGAR. I think they have a wonderful material. However, what I do think is that verbatim, many times that you see those words exactly what it says in there. I'll pull up some questions. Some of my people that have already taken the test before, can you share with the group some things that you've seen on the test when it comes to the Code of Ethics? There's a question about if you are being sued, if there's a malpractice suit against you, do you have to get the client permission to share those records?
No.
You do not. I have the right to protect myself.
I have a question.
Please.
There's been I've heard several different things about when to accept gifts. I've been told not to accept. I've been told to accept because you never know what it means to the client. And I've been told to accept under a certain dollar amount.
So the Code of Ethics, and I'll pull it up for you, there is no dollar amount. What it talks about is it has more to do with the what you have to look at what it means, the rationale behind it between what it means to you and the client. Good question, though. Pull that up.
So, do we accept?
It depends on. Okay, so there's not a dollar amount. I talked to you before about bartering. That's where that comes from. Bartering, all those things. Social workers must explore and participate in bartering only in very limited circumstances when it can be discriminated at its acceptable practice among the professionals in the community. Let's go back to that one. Okay. So then, what the Code of Ethics says, it talks about gifts specifically. What it says is there's not a dollar amount. What I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to look at the reason behind it for the client as well as myself. Okay. So it leaves some leeway there. Do I think it's okay to accept season tickets to the Major League Football team? Probably not. Those are a few $1,000s. That's probably not the best choice. However, I was pregnant with my middle child, and one of my clients knitted a baby blanket for me with my baby's initials in it. For me to say no to that would have been very, very disrespectful and harmful to my client. Okay, so that's what it talks about. Find that one. Okay, let's see. What's client, self-determination, quorum consent, competence, cultural awareness.
When Dr. Turner, where can a person get the ethical status to the NSW?
Just Google them.
Okay.
Just Google them.
Thank you.
And they're out there. And again, if you get it's a book that's this thick. I prefer to have I in general like the electronic copy. If you want a copy, you can print them yourself. Or I'm pretty sure you can actually go to the NASW site and ask for them, and they'll send you a copy. I like the electronic. That's just my personality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lot ADHD, and the more paper I have, the messier my desk is.
Okay. I can read that. So I can go Google that. Okay.
You sure can. And just make sure you Google the NS, and it'll come up the official NASW Code of Ethics. And one of the things you also can Google, you can Google a lot, but if you're not familiar with the ethical decision-making process, that's in the APGAR book. I haven't seen it in the TDC book. I don't know if it's there or not for my TDC users, but you need to know the ethical decision-making process. When there's an ethical decision, how you make that, and the Code of Ethics the NASW Code of Ethics discusses that.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's see here. I don't want to waste your time talking. I'll find it and I'll send it to you. But it really just talks about that. What you look at is you look at the relationship and the meaning behind it, not the dollar value. However, it does not make it acceptable for you to take something that's ridiculously expensive. That just looks inappropriate. And one of the things we talk about is that social workers will always avoid the look of inappropriateness. Okay. That's it right there. Okay. Anything else? That's another question. I'm going to pull up some questions here on the Code of Ethics. Okay. So this is an old test. This is it's old. It's about policy and professional ethics. It has to do with all of my indirect practice questions, which I think are really important. We spend a lot of time on direct practice, and this is different than my community organization, which is a whole separate ballpark. But a lot of us, when I went to college a million years ago, you took a clinical route, or you took the LMSW route. So I went to school in Florida. So in Florida, you do not have to have an LMSW. So my background was very much clinical. So I had to go back and really learn some of these things. But let's just look at some of these questions that are just our policy and ethics. Okay. We'll start with number 3. A factor that distinguishes block grants from categorical grants. Anybody know what those are? Do I hear some typing there? In general, block grants, the way that I remember it, it's a block of cheese. Someone gives you a block of cheese and says, feed all the people. You can make grilled cheese, you can make macaroni and cheese, you can make whatever you want. You just got to feed these people. Categorical grants tell you exactly what you have to do. I need you to make, macaroni and cheese for these people.
Oh, what?
So those are categorical grants.
I knew that one before.
So, number 3, a factor that distinguishes block grants from categorical grants is what? Categorical grants usually have a specific purpose, while block grants are dedicated to more general purpose. 2, block grants are usually funded by a combination of federal, state, and local revenues. 3, public law usually guarantees categorical grants. Or 4, block grants are usually less politically motivated. What do you think the answer is to that one, guys?
Is it 1?
It is 1. Categorical grants have specific purpose. Thank you. Okay. Look at number 5, Medicare Part A. What does it not include? Protection from substantial medical costs, funding from an insurance program, administration by the federal government, payment of all hospital, medical, nursing home, and outpatient medical costs. It does not include what? You can text in if you'd like. So if you watch TV, it's not this time of year, but just because it's past, but up and from like September to like December, you saw all of these commercials on how you should get your Part D and buy this and buy that, because Part A is what's covered by the government. However, it does not provide a lot of coverage. So what does it not include? Be brave. It is 4. It does not include all of your hospital payment. It does not include medication. It does not include nursing home or outpatient medical. So those commercials on TV will then try to suggest that you buy other things to make sure that you're fully covered. Okay. Number 6, Code of Ethics. A social worker is asked to provide treatment for a woman with whom he had an intimate relationship 2 years ago. He should, 1, provide treatment without question since it's a long period has passed. 2, provide treatment only after ascertaining the romantic attachment is over. 3, suggests it be appropriate. It suggests it would be inappropriate and unethical for him to treat her and urge her to find another clinician to provide help. Or 4, provide treatment but remain alert to problems that might develop because of the previous relationship. What do I do?
That's a 3. I like
that. What? How come? You're right, but come on, give me.
Because they had an intimate relationship before, and I think it's unethical.
You got it. You got it. Okay. He can. So if one of those answers is can he? But so provide treatment. If that said, but realize that he was aware that it was his responsibility, blah, 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 he could. But the best answer of that one is 3, no. Number 7, according to systems theory, public assistance, Medicaid, social services, and food stamps are considered what? Throughputs, inputs, social justice, social investments. So the key to that one is the systems theory. Systems theory says that everything works on another. If we look at the family systems approach, just kind of show what that looks like. In my family systems approach for boundaries, it talks about how the input, the throughput, things that come in from those closed boundaries. So the system approach, not necessarily always It doesn't always assume families, but the systems approach says that we work together, we need each other, that we're not an island. Okay. So according to the family systems approach, then the input comes from the environment. The output is what you put out, and what goes through here is the throughput. Okay. When it comes to the systems environment also, this theory says that the boundaries are important. That in a family system, mom and dad should be their own separate unit and also be a subsystem. And then the children should be their own unit, but as well as a subsystem as well. Okay. The word for this, if this closed system lets nothing else in, if there's no input and no output, this system entrophies, which means it dies. Exactly. If mom, keep going.
Would it be a through? I'm asking. Would it be a through system?
Okay. So the healthy system is throughput. Okay. So that's the answer, throughput. That's a healthy system. Okay. However, the words entropy and negative entropy, you'll see on the test, and it's based on these same family systems. Okay. So if this system doesn't allow anybody in, if it's closed, mom and dad die off, brother and sister never marry, never let anybody else in, this system will die. That is called entropy. E-N-T-R-O-P-H-Y. You'll see it on the test, entropy. If they let people in the system, it's called negative entropy, stops the death. Okay. So negative entropy is a good thing. So that's a systems approach. Okay. So the answer to this one is throughputs. I'm sorry, those are inputs. I do apologize. Those are inputs. According to the system, things that come in are inputs.
Inputs, okay.
Inputs, okay. If we have no inputs and the system is closed, they will entropy. Entropy is dying. Negative entropy is a good thing. Number 8. The social work policy has little intellectual influence on impact in promoting universal family-oriented social policies due to focus on specialization, a new emphasis on non-pathological view of social conflict, institutional view pervading this profession, or societal emphasis on residual social welfare and practices. The social work profession has little intellectual influence or impact in promoting universal family-oriented policies due to what? Don't answer at the same time. It's confusing when y'all the voices out there. Universal systems in general are things that are good for families, for everybody. In general, the term universality or universalism is a very good term, except when it comes to the cultural approach. You never want to take a universalist approach with culture. Okay, but the social work profession has little intellectual influence or impact on promoting universal family-oriented social policies. A universal family-oriented social policy would be like paid paternal leave for dads. That would be a universal. Everybody would get it. It's family-oriented. If we offered universal health care to everyone under the age of 5. That's what we're talking about. Universal family-oriented social policies. So while we many times respect and believe into that, how come our profession doesn't have a lot of influence? The answer to that one is 2. A new emphasis on, I'm sorry, that's not correct. The answer to that one is 4. Our society influence, our social work influence is based on residual social work programs and practices. So most of what we do in social work has more to do with the families that can't afford it. We don't look at a universal approach most often because we're spending much of our time and energy on residual social welfare programs. Can anybody tell me what that means, residual? So I know that you've all read, and in the when it comes to indirect practice, when there are programs out there, we have types. Types are residual, and types are universal. Residual, residual. I always think of leftover. So residual is for the people who really can't afford it. Food stamps, TANF, WIC, even like FEMA, those are kind of residual because you have to qualify, sometimes be means tested to get that support. What is a universal government policy? Something that everybody gets no matter what. How about public school? Public schools are partially funded by the feds as well as the states, and everyone is entitled to a free public education in this country. That is a universal policy. Okay? Social Security is most often a universal policy. As long as you have worked, you'll get something back. And even if you didn't work, you'll still get less back. So those are universal policies funded by the government that everybody gets. I'm sure none of you went to school on a loan or a Pell Grant. Those are universal, okay? Available to everybody. If you want to seek higher education and may qualify, residual would be based on income. However, loans are available to anybody no matter how much you make. And those are, and people hate to hear that, but that's part of our welfare policy program. They're just universal. Okay. Speaking of means tested, let's look at number 11. A means tested program is one that A, is specifically targeted toward a specific population. 2, is subject to an evaluation. 3, requires the applicant to prove financial need. 4, does not require a certificate of residence. A means tested program. Type your little fingers away, come on. It is 3. Means tested, means is your income. Means is how'd you mean to pay that bill? That is your means. So it requires the applicant to prove financial need. Those are means tested programs. That would be food stamps. That would be TANF. You have to free lunch. You have to prove how much income you make. And it really is not about how much you spend, unfortunately. It's about how much you bring in. What are your means? Okay. Number 17, I always find interesting. The fastest growing component of federal assistance program is what? The fastest growing. It is food stamps. Food stamps is the fastest growing. Okay, and certainly it depends on what's happening in the country at that time, in the country during the time. But food stamps is still the fastest growing. As we look at people who are getting older, We know that many of our older residents, got this huge group of baby boomers getting older, that they are focused definitely on getting food stamps. Number 18, a social worker seeks continuing cash for an indigent client who recently lost his vision after a serious automobile accident. Would probably refer the client to what? Would you qualify for SSI, public assistance, Title 20 agency, or private charity? Number 18 is 1, because a social worker seeking cash assistance for an indigent client who recently lost his vision. So he would probably qualify for Social Security income, which is based on your current income. Social Security disability is based on credits, how much you have paid in already. But SSI is just based on your being indigent. Okay. Number 25. A married supervisor develops an intimate relationship with a supervisee. Indicate the statement that best reflects the underlying principle that should be invoked. This is a code of ethic issue. Married supervisor develops an intimate relationship with a supervisee. I remember social workers were non-judgmental. The fact that he's married, we're gonna just, that doesn't often come into the equation. The answer is 4. The behavior is exploitive and violates professional ethics. It does not matter if he's married or not. It really has more to do that this is just not okay. I recently had this situation with one of my students in an internship, and she, a cute little blonde who had been at the internship probably a few weeks. It was they do the forensic interviews, so the agency is ran mostly by lawyers. Her supervisor was LCSW. And he thought it'd be a good idea to date her. His supervisor, who was a lawyer, again, different code of ethics than I carry, didn't see a problem with it. However, I did, and my job was to protect my student. So that I went actually the code of ethics, so we talked about what ethical code was being violated. I mean, he really could have lost his license. He's exploiting my, and she wasn't so innocent, but you know. So we really had to kind of get her out of there and put her someplace else, because that was a violation. That wasn't okay. 26. A supervisor in a child welfare agency learns that the agency's professional officer has been diverting job applications from gay and lesbian applicants with the tacit approval of the executive director and the board. As a result, gays have never been considered for employment, though perhaps qualified. What ethical principles drawn from the social worker code of ethics should guide the supervisor's actions in this situation? Okay. And if you don't know this word, that might affect kind of what you do. So tacit means she didn't say no. She didn't give overt approval, but she knew it was going on and she didn't say no. Okay. The choices then are: 1, a supervisor's first responsibility is to help workers manage their caseload and learn from practice experience. A supervisor is not responsible for every action in the agency. 2, the supervisor should resign from the agency both as protest and because the agency is behaving unethically. 3, the supervisor should take aggressive professional action to end the discrimination. Or 4, the supervisor should explore his or her own values and act accordingly. Okay. This one is 3. Okay. Discrimination based on race, age, sexual orientation, and religion are specifically talked about in the law as well as the Code of Ethics. The supervisor is obligated to take action to end this. Okay. And one of the things that when it comes to policy and these questions, you have to know the hierarchy. So if you are a intake social worker, the frontline social worker, you most often go up the chain. So you'd go up to your immediate supervisor. You might go up to like a clinical director, but it's the executive director, and then they answer to the board of directors. So that's the hierarchy that you need to make sure that you understand when it comes to these directions, when it comes to how an agency works. Okay. So this one is a supervisor. So the supervisor must take aggressive professional action. This cannot continue. And you'll see this was not one where he went to his supervisor, because that's most often the case. But when it's illegal, we're directly do something different. Okay. Let's 39. The residual perspective on social work welfare stresses that the idea that what? And the residual perspective, remember, that is what's left over. That is what we give to our poor or needy families. Okay. So the residual perspective says, A, social welfare programs are designed as a safety net for people who are incapable of benefiting from normal market services or other government programs. 2, social welfare programs should be a normal feature of society's social arrangement for everyone. 3, legislative authority for social welfare programs reside in the legislature. Or 4, social welfare programs should always be administered at the lowest administrative level of local government or religious institutions. And that one is 1. Social welfare programs are designed as a safety net for people who are incapable of benefiting from normal market services or other government programs. So the residual, that is the people who qualify based on means tested. The goal of that is it's a safety net. Okay. And not taking a stance on anyone ever immigrating to our country, but we're one of the very few countries that has a safety net. Most countries, you don't work, you don't eat. Let's look at 45. One major consequence of licensing and certification of social workers is that it, okay? So 1, offers protection for consumers but limits protection for social workers by increasing their vulnerability to lawsuits. 2, establishes fixed but inadequate professional standards. 3, go ahead. Is there a question? 3, provides a career continuum with a strict standard for each level. 4, protects the public from ineligible individuals, many of whom who do not have former social work training, by prohibiting their use of the social work title. As I mentioned to you before, that social work title, it is protected by law. You cannot call yourself a social worker unless you actually the credentials to prove it. Okay, so that would make the answer number 45. 4. It stresses title protection, the benefits of becoming licensed, and the benefits of the consumers of professional regulation. And I don't know about your area, but the area that I live in now, for a very long time, we really, our major university lost its accreditation. which is very rare, and I didn't live here at the time, not really sure what happened, but they lost their accreditation. So for a long time, this area was not producing social workers. We didn't have a program. So what I found now is a lot of our people have degrees and lots of other things, and then get to call themselves social workers because of the lack of qualified professionals in our area. So then knowing that is what that license and the certification is about, is making sure you have that certification. Also, the NASW is a very, very strong lobbying board. We purposely try to keep out other professions. Okay. So you'll sometimes look at, and I tutor for every other mental health, and I'm certainly not saying one. Well, I'm a social worker, so, but the NASW purposely keeps people out. So they try very hard to make sure that the social work term is protected, and especially what makes our education, our code of ethics, and all the stuff unique. We try to keep out many of the other professions purposefully. Okay. Number 51. The number of conditions under which a social worker is not required by law to maintain confidentiality. Select the statement below that is the most correct in describing instances in which confidentiality is not required. Okay, so 1, a social worker is sued for malpractice, violence is threatened, child or elderly abuse occurs. 2, child custody is in question, a client defrauds an agency, a client refuses to pay legitimate fees. 3, a client gives informed consent for a case record to be opened, criminal charge to be filed against a client assaults a social worker. Number 4, the agency executives order a social worker to provide information. The police inquire about a client. The worker is summoned to a civil suit. Which one of those circumstances when confidentiality is not required? I'm sorry. I think I mentioned to you earlier is about the malpractice suit. If someone is suing me, I have the right to protect myself. So confidentiality is not an absolute. There are a number of conditions that allow me to breach that confidentiality. And those 3 conditions especially are if I'm being sued, if I am threatened violence, or if there's child or elderly abuse which occurs. Okay. And just with this some added information. So when it comes to elderly abuse, it is still our job to report it. Elderly financial exploitation is one of the most common things we see. There is a law about the family farm. So what happens is if you place your elderly person in a nursing home and they're going under like state funds, once that person dies, if they owe the state or the nursing home money still, the government has the right to seize that family farm and sell it. So that law was passed in the early 1990s. Since then, we've seen an increase in elderly abuse because most people know that if I put grandma in the nursing home, then we're going to lose our house. And many times, many people are living in grandma's house. The thing is unless grandma is incompetent and proved incompetent by the state, she has the right to stay in her home. So there have been cases where she definitely has some physical issues, then the state will come in. But what you'll see many times is, one brother will call in because the other brother is, spending grandma's money. But if grandma refuses to leave, refuses to press charges, there's not a lot we can do unless she's deemed incompetent. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up, guys. Questions. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to pull over so you can see me and reopen my camera. I'm going to look straight at you. Okay. Questions? Well, I appreciate your time. And again, if there's, I've put the calendar out for this month of what we're going to be discussing. If there's something specific that you'd really like me to answer, I will answer it, and I can do a lesson on it. Someone asked me, and that's probably the second or third time I've asked about co-optation. So I'll probably actually do a video on that. If you're not following me on my YouTube channel, feel free to follow me, because sometimes it's easier just to make a video than to explain the same thing 12 times. So I do teach. My first session was at 7 o'clock. Well, I take that back. I was sick this morning. Normally it's at 7, but I've been teaching probably steady since about 4. So I do this all day, every day, and tomorrow I'll go back to work and teach my other students. I do love this profession. I do love teaching. And I thank you for letting me be a part of your professional career. Questions? Feel free. I don't bite unless you ask. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.